let's jump into the treasurers or financials for the whole board. That's everything that you should know for related to PTA financials. Let me bring up my slides. There we go. Slide it here. Can you all see that okay? Okay.
We don't see anything, Sheila.
No. Oh, wait. I need to share my screen first, right? Share. Desktop. Share. Okay. And then I think, can you see that? That's like in my presentation mode. Excellent. Okay. So show me the money, financial training for the whole board. Here is an outline of what I'm going to talk about. But essentially this is all kind of just general financial health. We can talk, I'll talk about PTA financials that were public charities, some good financial practices and procedures. We'll discuss how to create a budget and what it might look like. Treasurer duties at a glance, financial reports. We'll talk about membership, Totem specifically. Some of the tools that we use a lot, Totem, MyPT Easy. Have a brief discussion on phishing and email scams, and we'll have a look at the financial calendar just so you can check where things are due during the year. And I have some links, helpful links at the end. We have actually touched on some of these topics already. Michelle talked a little bit about some of the things, but I'll just go over really quickly. PTAs are public charities. We're eligible for to receive tax deductible donations, and generally we're exempt from paying taxes, federal and state taxes. PTA board members, that's not just the treasurer, but everyone, board and officers, are fiduciaries. And what fiduciaries are, you can consider it like a trustee. We have a financial, we both have like a legal and ethical relationship of trust with our members and our donors, supporters, and the school. We're trusted to protect the assets of our organization. That could be the money in the bank that you've already saved from previous years to any other assets you might have that you've bought for the school. And it also includes like your volunteers who are helping out and the PTA's reputation. Importantly, we need to file federal and state tax returns, various forms, to maintain charitable status. And that's one thing that's really important, that after both the IRS and with the state, where we are, it is the Department of Justice, the California Department of Justice, who deals with charitable organizations. We do need to be current. I think we can lapse a year, even two, but by 3 years, if you don't file your forms within 3 years, you lose your status as a charitable organization, and that will require some work to recharter, to reestablish yourself. So it's very important to keep up to date year over year. Oh, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and Michelle or someone can call them out, and I can answer them. I know I'll be covering a lot of things, so I just want to make sure I answer any questions, but I can't see the chat. So here's some good financial procedures that to safeguard your association and safeguard your assets. So your association members, that's the parents who join the PTA, the staff, the students, the students as well, and the administration. They elect the treasurer and other financial officers. They also approve PTA programs, activities, fundraisers, and expenditures. They also adopt and monitor the PTA budget, approving changes as needed. So you as a treasurer and just as a fiduciary, you're responsible for being really transparent with your membership, your association. A minimum of 2 trained PTA officers should receive, if you're dealing with cash and checks, it is good practice to have 2 people perhaps the treasurer and the financial secretary to receive any checks in cash, perhaps to enter them and account for it, and just make sure you keep a record of everything you've received. And then it's the association who approves. Okay, so following approval by the association executive board, the president and secretary sign a payment of authorization form for each and every PTA expenditure. And you might already see that that's basically a form that either the president, two people, it doesn't necessarily have to be, it should generally the president and the treasurer who sign and authorize the this PTA expenditure. And again, as good practices were quote, for good financial practice, we are required to have two check signers. That's typically the president and the treasurer, but it could be others. The PTA auditor, an auditor can be either elected or appointed, or even there was some discussion about hiring, a professional, all of those things, as long as they're appointed by the board. They will inspect monthly bank statements, and they perform 2 audits annually, one at midway point of the year and one at the end of the year. And the treasurer creates financial reports for each association meeting and each executive board meeting. So let's say you meet every month, you'll be, as a treasurer, the treasurer will be generating reports for each month, and also for general assembly meetings like today. This is our general assembly meeting for the Second District PTA, and the reports that I showed you shows the financials from the last since the last meeting. Okay, I'm gonna move forward. The budget. So here's again some looking forward to the next year. You've either already have a budget that has been approved by your general membership, or you're creating a new one, or thinking about or reviewing the budget from you're reviewing the budget. So generally you would elect, or not elect, but you would have an executive board. The executive board determines goals and programs for the upcoming year. A budget committee is appointed by the president or the board, and they're responsible for developing the annual budget. They'll review past budgets, income and expenditures, estimate, and they'll make estimates for probable incomes of all sources. They'll balance the income with the expenses, and they'll determine the amount of carryover funds that's set aside at the beginning of the operations. Carryover funds, sorry, the included in the budget are the carryover funds, and these are funds that are set aside at the beginning of the year. So as if you are starting the new year like we are now, you might be spending some money that you haven't made yet. So that's essentially like using the money that you had saved from last year. So that's something important to figure out while you're working on your budget. And then the unallocated reserve funds, this is the money that once you've accounted for all the income you expect to take in from fundraisers and donations, and all the expenses you intend to pay, and all the carryover funds that you're going to spend. This unallocated reserve is essentially the money that's left over in your bank account. And yeah, is there any questions there? Is there any questions in the chat? Okay. And then I didn't write this here, but the budget, not only the financial records, but also the budget is presented to the General Assembly and voted on. Typically, since the vote happens usually at the beginning of the year, you have the board, the outgoing board kind of approves, I guess, a temporary budget that will be presented to the General Assembly, because usually that happens after the school year started. Okay. So here's like a very high level treasurer duties at a glance. I actually did create a presentation that goes into a lot more specifics. So if you do have specifics, please, my email is at the end of this presentation. I'm definitely monitoring the treasurers and presidents email groups. First and foremost, we want to keep, treasurers need to keep a record of all receipts and disbursements. Disbursements is the money that we're spending, so checks and whatnot that go. So keep a record of all the receipts, the money coming in, and keep a record of all the money going out in a ledger. And typically that's some kind of accounting software. They also need to reconcile bank statements with the ledger monthly. So you have your bank account and you have your record, your accounting record somewhere. You want to make sure your bank account and your records match up. And it'll point to any, we're all human, we make mistakes. Sometimes there are issues. It's good to just take it's good to do this once a month. So you are just on top of what's going in and out of your bank account and making sure that matches with what your accounting software says and also matches with your budget as well. Keep them informed with financial reports generated by the board. Treasurers need to remit all district and state and national dues. And then treasurers also need to complete captive insurance forms, file state and federal taxes, and charitable organization forms. Again, I sort of touched on that to just maintain just good financial health and to make sure you keep your charitable status or status federally and statewide. Here's a sample of a financial report. We already actually saw one earlier, so I won't go too much into detail here, but it's a good, this is the type of report that you'd be generating for your meetings. You want to, as a treasurer, you want to highlight any major expenses or receipts that you get for that period. Since we've gone through this already, I won't spend too much time here, but that's just there for your reference. This is still the financial report continued. Actually, just as a quick review, the first part is balance forward. This is the money that you have in the bank. The second part is the receipts of all the money that you expect to receive through the year, and the middle part is the expenses, and that's all the money you're spending. The columns on the left, the columns in the middle, so the three columns show you what's happening for the period, the selected period, like let's say just the month that you're generating this for. The middle column shows you everything that you've done for the year, and the last column shows you what you had planned in the budget. So that's a good way to do a quick check to see if you're matching the budget. And then, and then at the end, there's usually the checks that you've written for that period. I'm sort of breezing through here just as an effort of time, but if there's any questions, please, you can call them out to me because
we have a few, Sheila. I don't know if you want to take a quick pause. There's a couple that have been asked here in the chat. Do you want me to read them for you, or do you want to look at the chat to see what they are?
Could you read them, because I think I won't be able to.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. Lori asks, is it generally recommended that you don't have unallocated reserve funds since it is money fundraised? Like, how are we supposed to predict personal and individual taxes so we don't get personal refunds?
Can you repeat that question? I think there was a couple of things in there.
Sure. I think the first question here is it generally recommended that we don't have unallocated reserve funds since it is money fundraised? I think that you mean like, so if you have one year, a bunch of people are donating money for a certain purpose for the PTA, then if you save it and they're unallocated, then, is that really, I think what she's asking.
It is actually good to have some money, because this is like, this can carry over if you have any unexpected expenses during the year, especially big ones. It is useful for that. I believe you shouldn't, it is good, it is healthy to essentially have unallocated reserves up into like, not too much. Of course, you don't want too much. You essentially want to, if you typically, let's say you've typically taken $20,000 a year, if you have unallocated reserves up to about half of that, or up to the full amount of that, let's say $20,000, I think that's healthy to have. So you don't necessarily have to spend all the money that you.
So I was kind of wondering, like, if we're doing our budget and we are on the cautious side and we say, oh, we're going to only do $500 for this thing for this school year, and then we raise, say, $700, and then with that $200, do we save it for the next school year for that similar purpose? Like, oh, well, now we're starting off with $200 to go for this thing next year? Or do we say like, hey, we have $200 more to spend towards this event this year?
Right.
If that makes sense. Like, yeah. I know when you do your personal taxes, you're supposed to predict how much, this was the example that I had in the question, was like, you're supposed to predict how much you're going to need to be taken out so you don't get that much back at the end of the year. And I didn't know if like the budgeting is kind of the same way, where you need to forecast how much you're going to bring in. And then if you bring in more than that, do you need to use it for that now? Or
no, you don't need to use it for that fiscal year. It is important to try to get that as accurate as possible, and you can adjust year over year. Let's say you notice typically a lot of these line items, they're year over year, they're things that have happened before, so you can get a good idea just checking last year's financials to see how much did they take in last year. Do I need to make an adjustment? Do I need to make that bigger or smaller for either the expense or the fundraiser? But if you do happen to take in more money, that is great. That's not a bad thing, and you don't need to spend that down right away. In fact, if you do make adjustments to your budgets, let's say you wanted to add more, spend more because you took in more this year, you have to get that approved by your membership. You can't just make that adjustment on the fly, if that makes sense. Because the budget that you started at the beginning of the year, that's the golden standard. You have to keep referring back to that budget. And if you need to make an amendment, which you can, you do need your general membership to approve that.
I'd just like to offer that in the pandemic years, COVID 2020, that a lot of people's budgets didn't look anything like that. What they expended and what they took in didn't look like anything like what they predicted at the beginning of the year. And sometimes they were able to take care of emergencies because they were not holding events that cost a lot of money. And if you have a budget that includes a reserve, then when things come up that you don't expect, you have some funds. And also, you don't have to spend the money if you raise a lot more. You can just use it as general operating support and carry it over into the next year.
Okay. Thanks. In an effort for time, I do understand that there's probably a few more questions. I'm definitely happy to either stay on after or answer questions over email. But I think I'm just gonna go through a few more slides, and then if there's time at the end, we can talk, or we can talk in a breakout room after. Okay. Let's see. So that's a financial report. Membership. So you, in terms of membership, in terms of the financials of memberships, we take in, there are dues, membership dues. Typically, I think it's in your bylaws that you set the cost of your membership. Each school could potentially have a different cost. Let's say your cost for membership is $10. Which I think is typical, but some schools have it higher, lower, and I know some. I know some costs are very, like for student costs to join the PTA, it's like $5 at Aptos, which essentially just covers all the fees. But there are district and CAPTA membership dues. So you want to keep track of all your memberships. If you're on Totem, great. It's already keeping track of everything for you. Money balance that you keep is yours, is your PTA's. I think it automatically associates the costs for the district, and the CAPTA dues are already removed. If you're not using Totem, you have to be a little bit more diligent about keeping track of your memberships. You know, it could be as simple as a spreadsheet or however you do it, but you need to then fill out a unit disbursement. That I'll send the details out to all the treasurers soon, but basically you'll fill out a form to list all your members and have a check that will reimburse, or that will be sent to me or the Second District to account for all your Second District fees and the CAPTA fees and the national level fees. And then, oh yeah, here I have it. It's the third point here. It's just to submit those remittance forms. I just wanted to cover briefly Totem, because I know lots of boards use it, PTAs use it, and I think it's really fantastic. My school didn't use it, so I don't know it so well, but you can actually look at Totem's, the Totem associations for all of SFUSD with the link I provided here. And from there, you can check out your specific PTA's Totem. You can sign up online, you can make a donation, and then the treasurer will have access to this, and they'll have a dashboard with, if they log in, they'll have a dashboard, and you can see all the memberships and donations that are coming in. There's more information. I'm linking more information at the end to Totem and how to use it. PT Easy is also another really useful tool. Actually, all PTAs have access to PT Easy. We do want you to upload, or if you have difficulties, I can help you. But essentially, all treasurers and presidents should be able to log into PT Easy. You can see a historical record of all the financials that were saved from previous years. So you can look back and see financial records, those reports that I discussed, and also the budgets for previous years. That is the free version that CAPTA, like all PTAs have because of CAPTA, but I think there's more information. A lot of schools do this too. There's a paid upgraded version, so you can do your accounting in PT Easy as well. So you can essentially use this as a ledger to to receive checks and to receive cash and checks, and to write checks and disbursements. And it's also very useful for generating financial reports. You'll see here on this picture, you can see that you can generate financial reports, financial secretary's report, the treasurer's report, which is like a list of all the checks and expenses that for the year. So there's a bunch of just financial tools there, and it's meant for PTAs that you might not necessarily have an accounting background. So it's a little bit of a simplified accounting software. And we discussed already phishing and email scams, but just some best practices. It's really good to probably have the phone numbers of all your board members handy, saved in your contacts, because if you feel like you received a potential scam or email that looks suspicious, it's best to call the person directly to ask, did you send this email? Just remember that we always leave a paper trail. Like we're recording every transaction, financial transaction essentially. So if someone is asking to wire money or send things really quickly or urgently, or asking you to send use gift cards, those are big red flags. Never click on any links and emails that you suspect are phishing. Look closely at the email details, because these typically mimic your unit email. So for instance, some of you have like president@longfellow. Like emails like that. That could those emails are just easily mimicked by scammers. So yeah, and just follow your gut too. If you feel like something's fishy, it's probably fishy. Okay, so this is just a quick look at the calendar year from a financial perspective. Between August and September, we're presenting and approving your prior year's audit report, your prior year financials, and your current year's budget at the first General Assembly. September and October, these are less important. If you have if you do any raffles, there's some California charitable organization forms that you need to submit in September and October. October 1st, you need to remit new memberships, and then after that, you should get in the habit of submitting those monthly. I'll send out details for that for the treasurers on how to do that. November 1st, there's an insurance premium that needs to be paid. November 15th, so this is the big day for all of the state and federal taxes and forms. Again, I have a more detailed presentation with how to do a lot of these things. And so I just wanted to highlight that November 15th is the due date for the for last year's, so the last year's taxes and forms. In January, there's a workers' compensation form, and even if you don't have staff, you do need to at least fill out this form and submit it. January, February, you're doing a mid-year audit, and between March and April, you're preparing next year's budget and you're thinking about it. And then July, August, you're doing your audit again for next year, the end of the year. And then I just have some links here. We are linked sanfranciscopta.org, CAPTA. There's so many tools on CAPTA. It's really fantastic. I go there first, and just, it's searchable as well. So there's lots of things there. So there's information for treasurers, like some basics, treasurer duties, financial toolkits, how to create a budget, and it's all there, and some examples, useful examples of what can go in a budget. Here's more about Totem and how to access some of the Totem information. And Totem just yeah, I think actually in terms of my presentation, yeah, the last thing is just please, you can log into PTEZ, and if you can't log into PTEZ, please reach out to me and I can help you. And you can always email me at treasurer@sfpta.org. That's it for my presentation.
Thanks, Sheila. I know we're probably going to move into the breakout soon, but there are a few questions that are in the chat about that maybe you can check just there. I'll just flag that they're around filing taxes and raffle deadlines and what they cover. And so maybe when you stop sharing, you could just answer them there. But there are questions about just the raffles.
Sure.
Is it for any time? Is the raffle deadline in October for any raffle we might have during any part of the year? Was one question.
Yes, it is.
I think so. I need to go back and look at the specifics. But yes, I believe this is in preparation for this year. So the first deadline I showed was to submit your information from the previous year. But if you're planning to do it for this year, there is, I think it's the October date or the second date.
Even if you're not sure if you're going to have a raffle, you can go ahead and submit that form and put any date on it, and it's okay. You'll be clearing that up at the end of the year. So go ahead and get those raffle forms in. So the next and final portion, I think it's amazing and wonderful, and thank you all for still hanging in there this long Saturday morning into the afternoon. And I asked my husband to bring me some coffee, and he brought me some coffee, right? And I'm like, I don't know that that's the right cup to bring because it's not really appropriate with the breakfast wine. It's actually coffee in there, but he's like, after all these hours, it's okay. So I have coffee now, or more of it. we're going to do the breakout room so we can get really particular with parliamentarian information, with secretary training, and with membership training. And so
I'm gonna just jump in and say, because I see there's some questions from John O'Connell. I know that John O'Connell, you've just sort of started a few things, so I'll reach out to you after and we can discuss because I think you have some like specific things that I can help you with after.
okay, so Michelle is going to help us break out into the rooms technically. And so how we're going to do that is ask you to use the Zoom reaction and just raise your hand if you would like to be in one of